NICAN. I'm going to restart for the recording. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Ordonez. I'm an executive committee member here at NICAN, and we're so excited to have all of you here, so many familiar faces and so many new ones. So we're going to get started. And first, I just want to start by saying that it's really wonderful to see so many of you here in community after the really disappointing elections that we went through, all the hard work that we put in. I think it's really important to put all of that disappointment. I know we need time to, just reflect, but after, come together as a community and put that energy into a positive space. And NICAN can be that, where we organize together as a movement, people power. I love, what Bernie used to say, not me, us. It's not about one of us, it's about all of us together and the working class and what we can do to organize together. So to start us off, please intro yourself. So drop in the chat your name, where you're coming from, and how you're feeling about the election. What do you want to do next? What do you want to organize around? Just introduce yourself. And a few things. So as we have speakers, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that you can put your questions and comments on the chat, but because of time and because we have to keep moving, Emily or Ting, who are on here, will be able to get to your questions and, bring them up to the speaker if time permits. But we will have a question and comment section at the end where we're going to be able to unmute each other and be able to speak for some time. That doesn't mean that the speaker will be there, but we will be able to talk to each other. So welcome again. And we're seeing that we have people from all around, from Manhattan, from Rockland, from everywhere. So, former Bernie delegate. I'm one too. So wonderful to meet you. So we're gonna hand it off to George, who's gonna start us off and talk about, what we just went through. What has NIPEN been up to?
Thank you, Maria, and welcome everybody. Happy Veterans Day for you veterans out there. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for your service. So we're going to get right to the meat of this. We here are, at NIPEN, and just like everyone else, kind of stunned from last week's election. We're determined to talk about, before we could talk about where we're going to go, we have to know what happened and why it happened. And we've invited some of our friends tonight to come here and give their perspective on those issues. And we're not going to sugarcoat it. We took a hit, a big hit. We lost the presidency. We lost the Senate majority, and we being, the Democratic Party, but, the people who eat with a knife and spoon, at least. It looks like we're going to be fall short of controlling the House, but a very close margin. So, we're going to ask our speakers to give us a perspective of why they think that happened, and then how we can move forward. And we have a lot of work to do moving forward. Just one thing that I found interesting with this election was because Trump won the popular vote also, and there were states like New York where Trump got 44%, a very high number for New York State. But one of the things we found out was Trump's vote was less than he got last election. It wasn't like an overwhelming number of people just decided to switch. But Harris got 14 million fewer voters. 14 million. That says a lot right there. But, we didn't lose everything. In fact, we had some real important victories that we can learn from. AIPAC pledged to get rid of the entire squad. Well, the entire squad not only won, but won big. Super majorities. And they didn't run away from progressivism to do it. embraced it, those ideas. We won some, races upstate where Trump won. Leah Webb won. Anna Kellis, who's going to join us here tonight. AOC, as I said, we won back 3 House seats, including a very impressive win by Josh Riley up in 19. Yeah, you guys did a great job. And Josh Riley did not run away from his beliefs. In fact, he was on the WFP line and got 21,000 votes on the WFP line. Enormous vote up there on that line. Speaking of the WFP, they got 70,000 votes in that area, which means that they are going to remain a political party with a ballot line. Okay, but you have to put that in context that Harris got 260,000 on their line. Gillibrand got 370,000. That means Harris didn't get over 100,000 WFP votes that could have gone to her. Well, we have to ask, why did that happen? So, we did have some victories here, and we learned, I think, a great deal, and we're going to have to follow up. So, again, the purpose of this meeting and asking our speakers, please address, why do you think this happened? What's the extent of it? Like I said, yes, we lost 3 United States Senate seats, but we still have the filibuster. They do not have 60 votes, the Republicans, so that's important too. Even though we hate the filibuster, they used it. We might as well use it. And then we're going to ask how we can defend those people who are going to be subject to attack. First and foremost are immigrants, are undocumented and other immigrants. How can we defend those folks? But not only a defense, we have to go on the offense. When we have Democratic senators that are state senators or Congress people who are adopting the Republican line, maybe we got to consider taking them out in a primary, not just being on the defensive. So defending our people, starting with our immigrants, pushing our progressive legislation even harder, and going on the offense. That's what we're going to ask our speakers to address. And I hopefully you'll get involved in that with NIPAN, and we'll move forward. Because you haven't lost until you give up, and we're not giving up.
All right, so we're waiting for our first speaker to come on. Ting, any news on Anna or Brad?
Nope, not yet.
All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We get the slides on, and we can talk a little bit about, what we do here at NIPAN. So George was saying a little bit about that. Or we actually don't need the slides.
Yeah,
Sorry? Okay, so
Maria, I could give an update up here from the 24th
I know. I'm working on it.
CD.
I got to knock people out in order to get.
Jay, that would be perfect if you want to do that. That would be amazing.
Okay. I'm Jay Belanca. I'm Washington County Progressives. I'm also the Democratic County Chair of Washington County. And as probably most of you know today, our current Congresswoman, Elise Stefanik, is now going to be representing us in the United Nations. So heaven help us with that. But what's going on right now, but most of you are probably familiar, but we're going to have a special election. It looks like the timetable for this will be, depending whether there's Trump succeeds in his recess appointments or not, probably early February she'll resign her seat to go to the UN. That starts the clock ticking for Governor Hochul to declare a vacancy and a special election. Once she declares the election day, it has to go, it can be up to 90 days. So we're looking at an election to fill the vacancy here, probably late April, early May. Right now, I guess there's all kinds of, the New York Times is speculating. I just got a call before I got on here that they're thinking if Mark Molinaro loses in the 19th, he's going to come up and declare his candidacy here in the 21st. And there's a bunch of people. So that could be happening. Also, the 21st has kind of been made a dumping ground in the gerrymandering. So we have a very red district. They stole a bunch of Democrats from the 21st to put in the 22nd, which we did flip the 22nd, but that means it's even harder to win as a Democrat here in the 21st. So there's a lot of speculation. There's some people that ran before that want to run again that nobody's too excited about. But this being a special election, there's no primary, there's no petitioning. 13 of us will decide who the candidate is here, and that'll happen on the Republican side. So right now we don't have a candidate. We have lots of people who want to run, but I would say 90% of them that have contacted us are not viable. They have no idea. They just of what running a congressional campaign is like. We are going to reach out to a Democratic assemblyman up in Clinton County who's very popular, Billy Jones. We don't know if he will run or not. Being a special election, he doesn't have to resign his seat. It's a special. It's a no risk situation for him. But stay tuned. That's what's happening in the 21st. And if everybody remembers 2017, when Christine Pellegrino decided to run, NIPAN and all the progressive people came out and supported her and flipped a red district to blue. Maybe we can do that again in the 21st, but just bring your bear spray if you come up here to campaign. Thanks.
Thanks, Jay. So we're going to get the slides on right now, so Catherine can talk a little bit about the actions we're going to mention a little later on, but let's do some of that right now. Nick, amazing. Okay, so we're going to go to the Global Justice Committee actions. Amazing. Catherine, you're on. You're muted. Catherine, you're muted.
Hi. Now, I'm not muted. I'm Catherine Levy. I'm a member of the Executive Committee of NIPAN. I want to suggest to you some actions we can take before the speakers begin, and some committees you can join. Just to tell you how you can use this screen, if you can take a screenshot of that QR code, that will take you to the sign-in for the committees. Otherwise, you can use the committee link. And I just want to tell you that also we'll be sending all of this to you tomorrow morning. First of all, we all understand, I'm sure, on this call that our immigrant communities are going to be facing terrible threats from the new Trump administration. NIPAN is determined to protect those communities in any way we can. For instance, we are thinking of creating neighborhood citizen action groups throughout the state to help people who are endangered and to be able to act quickly. So if you're interested in joining with us in this effort, I hope you will sign up for our immigration committee. Again, you can use the QR code or you can use the link that's at the bottom of the screen. We've also recently formed the Global Justice Committee to build on work we have done over the past 2 years for peace and justice in Israel, the occupied territories, and throughout the Middle East. We're working, of course, to stop the slaughter in Gaza, the West Bank, and unfortunately now Lebanon, and trying to prevent a catastrophic war with Iran. But we all recognize that Israel, through organizations like AIPAC, is having a major impact on our democracy, an impact that is likely to grow. We've already seen AIPAC defeat many progressives, particularly progressives of color. We lost our great Jamal Bowman recently, but they are not going to stop, and we have to stand up to them, not only to defend the progressive agenda, but democracy itself. So if you're interested in joining us in the Global Justice Committee, please sign on tonight or tomorrow when you get these links through email. But I am also going to ask you to take some immediate actions that you can take this week, actually in the next few days.
We're going to get to those actions in a little bit, but we have Brad Lander on, so we're going to let him go ahead and speak. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So George, you're going to go ahead and introduce Brad.
Okay. Our first speaker is the controller of the city of New York, Brad Lander. Brad is someone I've known for many, many years. He started as a community activist. He headed up a group called the Fifth Avenue Committee, which was a group that protected tenants from eviction and fought the gentrification of Park Slope and people being just put out of their houses and apartments. And then he went to the council, and he had a tremendous run at the council. He and Jamani Williams founded the Progressive Caucus in the council, and they fought to end stop and frisk. Brad even introduced and got passed a bill that made some fast food workers have the right to not get fired except for good cause. It was an enormously incredible bill that other communities are trying to implement in their council. He's so pro-labor. That was a bill that no one thought would get passed, and he did pass it. As controller, he has taken on the mayor and fought for retiree rights. When the mayor tried to switch all the city retirees to a Medicare Advantage plan, and there was a contract with Aetna to do that, Brad wouldn't sign off on the contract because he said it was illegal and a judge was about to rule on it, and the judge ruled that they couldn't do it. He's now suing the governor for canceling, not implementing the law regarding congestion pricing. I could go on and on and on about Brad, but he let him talk for himself. But he has a tremendous progressive background, and it's my honor to introduce Brad Lander.
Thank you so much, George. It's great to be with you. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Naipan. It feels good to be on with you. I don't know whether I'll call it hope, but what I think I'll call it is being resolute. We are clear about what is required of us, and by working together with others, we know a lot of what we're called on to do. So George asked me to say a little about sort of what I think happened and why. And then even more, how does the progressive movement go forward, especially in New York City? So I'll offer a little bit about that. I mean, in terms of what happened and why, look, when people feel precarious, when their rent's going up and their incomes are not, when they're afraid of being evicted, when they're seeing prices rise, they expect government to show up and do something for them. And when that doesn't happen, they get angry. They become vulnerable to someone looking for someone to blame. And Donald Trump's got a brilliant knack for doing that, for taking the trauma of working and middle-class people, their feelings of insecurity and precarity, and weaponizing that with fear and hatred of immigrants, trans people, of each other. And if we're going to stop that, then we've got to deliver better for people. We have to actually confront the core issues they're facing, precarious jobs, the cost of housing, of healthcare, of childcare, of higher ed, all the things, of course, that Naipan and I have been fighting for and making some progress on locally, but not being able to really add it up together to a powerful movement and message. And now we're going to have to do that more than ever. And look, I don't want to sugarcoat it. You guys know this. These are going to be really grim times, jeopardizing our neighbors, especially our immigrant neighbors, jeopardizing reproductive rights, jeopardizing the democracy itself. Trump has been very clear, and in the appointments he's starting to make. So how do we go forward? I'm going to focus on what I think we need to do here in New York City, where I'm honored to be your New York City controller, and I'm running for mayor because that's part of running the city in a way that lives up to these values. So it seems to me three things. One, we've got to stand up and protect the most vulnerable in effective ways. Two, we've got to deliver on the bread and butter issues for working and middle class people. And three, we've got to run the city more effectively to show that our values can actually work. Not just we say them, but that they add up to, we've got to show that the most diverse, inclusive, welcoming city can also be the most prosperous, the safest, the best city. And we can do those things. So a couple of thoughts on each one of them. I'm glad to hear NIPAN is already planning on how to stand up and protect the most vulnerable. I was proud to be out there with a lot of you on Saturday. I actually came back from the Somos conference early so I could get out and march with Make the Road, march with the groups of our immigrant neighbors saying, we're not going back. We have good sanctuary city laws, and those have been lied about. So I think it's important to remember what they do. If someone has committed a serious or a violent crime, the path is clear, actually. There's a path for a judicial warrant, and those folks, can be handed over. But for the vast majority of families, of kids, of people who are here and working hard, 60,000 of them in our own shelters, we've got to show up for them. Last time, we all went to JFK together to prevent the Muslim ban from being implemented. I suspect here it's more likely to be at the Roosevelt Hotel or in one of these shelters for asylum seekers that the city itself is operating. And we're going to need to be ready to show up with those networks and say, that's against the law of New York City. We expect our mayor to uphold the laws in New York City. And we ourselves are going to put our bodies in the way with those kinds of grassroots community action networks. Now, we also have to do more to make sure we're helping those folks get connected to jobs so they can move out of shelter and, support themselves while their asylum cases are processed. There's some great grassroots work happening on that folks like Adam Abba and Power Malu and Ruth Messenger and the Synagogue Coalition and many others, Emma's Torch, are doing. So there might be some grassroots work to help there, because helping people submit their asylum applications, get their work authorizations, and get jobs are obviously some of the best ways to help folks get out of shelter where they'll be less vulnerable. So stand up and protect the most vulnerable. Two, deliver on bread and butter issues for working and middle class people. George mentioned a few of the things we've already done here in New York City. I was proud to pass the first law in the country giving Uber and Lyft drivers minimum pay. That's 60,000 people, but Uber and Lyft are trying to undermine it. And so we've got to make sure that doesn't happen. Same for deliveristas, same for fast food workers who we've given predictable schedules, paid sick days, a higher minimum wage, and now protections against unfair firing. We raised pay for nurses, for workers in the creative economy, made freelancers less vulnerable to wage theft, but we've got to do more to connect the dots. So what's next? That Secure Jobs Act that we passed for fast food workers so they can't be fired on a whim. New York City could do that for all workers. We could be the first city in the country that ends at-will employment for our workers, and we don't need the federal government or even the state government. We did it for fast food workers. We could do it for all workers in New York City, so when they're not defended by the National Labor Relations Act, instead, they could be protected by New York City law. I think instead of the Secure Jobs Act, we should call it the You're Not Fired Act, as kind of a stick in the eye to that president that's coming in, who made his bones firing people on a whim. We won't let that happen here. We've got to invest in mass transit to make our systems work better. That's why I'm proud to be leading the legislation against Governor Hochul's unlawful pause of congestion pricing. We've got to deliver on 3K and pre-K and expand childcare options. There's a great state level campaign to fully fund childcare and make it universal. Again, we don't need the federal government to do that. Check out Rebecca Balin's great campaign for universal childcare in New York. We can deliver for people. They can see that government works for them. And that's why the third thing I'll just end on is we have to run the city more effectively to show that our values can actually work. Donald Trump capitalized on feelings of disorder that people are feeling. And I'll give you just one issue. We've seen a big rise since the pandemic of mentally ill folks sleeping on the street. And that gives people, I mean, of course, it's most awful for those folks themselves, but there's no doubt it's elevated people's feelings of anxiety and disorder and unsafety. So, what we should do is end street homelessness of severely mentally ill people in New York City. That is within our grasp to do. Today's Veterans Day. We dramatically reduced veterans homelessness with a housing first approach. We could do the same now for people living on the street with severe mental illness. That'll be a more compassionate city and a safer one. And if we do those three things, stand up for vulnerable neighbors, deliver on bread and butter issues for working and middle class people, and run the city better to show our values can actually work, then we can make sure that it's not just words when we say this is an inclusive, welcoming, diverse, committed to equality city. We can show it makes it prosperous and safe and livable for everyone. And that, I believe, would be the best answer that we could possibly give to this monstrous president that we are about to face.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brad. We're not taking questions right now of candidates, and I understand that you have a busy schedule and everything, but thank you so much for coming and giving your thoughts and great suggestions for us.
And yes to the New York Health Act, by the way, Amy. I know we're not taking questions, but I see it in the chat. I am 100% supportive of the New York Health Act in addition to universal childcare. Oliver Fine is there, who I see most Sundays out at Union Square. And it's great to see him and great to see all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brad. Take care.
Yeah, we're all supporting the New York Health Act here. So we are all very supportive of healthcare for all. But we're going to move on, and we're going to get Zoran to come in and speak a little bit about his thoughts and what he thinks we should do next. But a little bit of a bio for him. Zoran Mamdani is a New York State Assembly member for District 36 in Queens and was elected as a Democratic Socialist after defeating the incumbent in 2020. He has taken on many fights for working class New Yorkers, like advocating for and passing debt relief for taxi drivers and passing a fare free bus pilot program, which I think is amazing, all across NYC. And he's also been an advocate for housing rights, healthcare, Palestinian rights, and so much more. And now, very exciting, he's running for mayor in New York City. So, Zoran, come on in.
Hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to join you all today, and I caught the tail end of Brad's remarks and was just happy to be a part of this meeting. So if I understand the format correctly, the most appropriate thing is to give my diagnosis of how we got to this moment and the way that we can get out of it. And, I spent much of Sunday on Hillside Avenue in Queens and on Fordham Road in the Bronx. These are two neighborhoods that saw the most significant turns towards Trump and even larger drop-offs in voting overall. And I went to speak to New Yorkers to ask them why. Why did they vote for Trump, or why didn't they vote at all? To get a better sense as to how we got to this moment. And what I heard from so many of them was the cost of living crisis, was an inability to afford their day-to-day life, and the sincere belief that they had more money in their pocket 4 years ago. And when they looked at the ballot this time around, in their words, they only saw one option that offered them change, that offered them more affordable groceries, that offered them a cheaper standard of life, and did so while promising them peace. And we know how ridiculous and insincere these promises are when they come from Donald Trump. We know not to believe them. We know that they are simply attempts at exploitation of working people's very real pain. And yet, what I heard from so many of these New Yorkers is that these were the only messages they heard with regards to these issues. And when you are operating in a void, any alternative starts to shimmer. And I think in order for us to reckon with how we got here once again, and to ask ourselves how we can ensure we never return to this kind of a politics, even under a different name or a different candidate, I think it requires us to put the working class at the center of our politics. And what that means is speaking directly to New Yorkers and Americans at large about the pain that they are feeling in their day-to-day existence, not trying to tell people that the economy is strong even as they cannot afford to buy eggs from their local grocery store, and to offer them direct and explicit policies that will transform their lives. I think that for too many people, when they think about politics or listen to politicians, it sounds like a fading relevance to what they are actually going through. And I think what we've seen with our party, with the Democratic Party for many years, is that we have started to speak more about emotion and values than we have around the pain that working class voters are feeling. And I think that this is an opportunity now for us to reckon with that and to rectify it. And I think that one of the first moments that we will have to do so across this country will actually be in this mayor's race that's upcoming, because so many of the voters who either didn't show up or who did and voted for Trump this time around, I asked them, what would it take for you to vote for a Democrat once again? And the answer was the economy. The answer was policies and promises that would actually make life more affordable for them. And I think in order for us to answer those requests, to answer that pain, that despair, we have to put forward policies that we can implement here on the first day. And so that's why in launching my campaign for mayor, it has been animated initially by 3 clear policy proposals. The first of which is to freeze the rent for the more than 2 million rent stabilized tenants across New York City. They have experienced a 9% increase under Mayor Adams' 3 years of being the leader of our city, rent increases that we haven't seen since a Republican ran City Hall. The second promise is to make our buses fast and free. We have more than 1 million New Yorkers who ride the bus every single day, and they are riding the slowest buses in the nation, all while they're being asked to pay more and more. And what we found in studies is that 1/5 of all New Yorkers struggle to afford the bus fare. And third, similar, Brad spoke about this as well, is universal childcare. The necessity of making universal childcare a reality for every New Yorker, whether their child is 6 weeks or 5 years of age. And the reason that these proposals have any interaction and relationship with Trump having won and returning to the White House is that if we can address the despair that working people are facing, if they can find the solutions to their day-to-day anguish within the Democratic Party, once again, within policies and proposals that are being put forward by people who have a sincere interest, then we can actually fight and defeat Trumpism. Because if we understand Trump's movement as only being one that can be defeated at the ballot box, we will be here again in 4 years. Because it's the inaction over 40 years of a day-to-day existence, of difficulty, of despair, that leads us to the point where someone like Donald Trump could put themselves forward as an alternative to this. And I think that we have to meet that with a very different kind of politics. And so I'm very excited at the prospect of doing so, but I am quite horrified at the necessity of it, and that we have once again returned to this place where the failures within the Democratic Party have paved the way for the rise of a right-wing movement such as this. And I know we're not taking any questions. I'm always happy to answer any, but if not now, then I'd be happy to come back at any time and engage in it.
if we have a few minutes, I don't know if anyone, if Emily or Ting want to bring up any questions from the chat. Do you want that? No.
Would you like me to look at questions on the chat?
Or do you want to do that, or we had
Happy to.
actions to go? But Emily, it's your call.
The chat is a zoo, and I had to step away from the computer because my father fell in the other room. So I am not on top of anything right now. Sorry.
Okay.
And I don't see any for Zoran at the moment. But
Okay.
maybe we get them to you by email or something, Zoran, if we get some.
You know, I
Well,
think I would love to
I
come
saw
back.
one, Zoran.
I'd
I
love
saw
to have
one.
you back. Just come again.
Well, I saw one question. Someone said, why buses and not subways? And I think that would be a worthwhile question to answer.
Absolutely. So I think, you know, I fundamentally do believe that all public transit should be free because I believe that public transit is a right of every New Yorker. But I think that the first step to take on that journey is buses. And the reason I think it should be buses is because the ridership of buses is disproportionately more working class of any of the forms of public transit. And it is the first step because it's also much more fiscally possible to take as opposed to doing the entire system at once. I say this as someone who led the fight to win the first free bus pilot in New York City history, where we made one bus free in each borough. And what we saw in the results of doing so was that ridership increased by more than 30%, that assaults on bus operators dropped by nearly 40%, and that of the new riders, a majority were making less than $28,000 a year, and 11% of them were previously driving in a car or taking a taxi and were now instead taking public transit. So we saw that there were economic benefits, there were safety benefits, and there were also environmental benefits. And I think that that offers us a window into what it could look like if we finally gave New Yorkers what they deserved and allowed New Yorkers to board the bus at any door, gave them both the $2.90 back into their pocket and a peace of mind. Because as we know, it's not just about the statistics, it's not just about the bar graphs, it's also about the sense of sanity that there's one less thing you need to worry about. There's one less thing you don't need to reach into your bag or your pocket to pay for. You can simply get on and get off and go about your day. Because I think what we're seeing is New Yorkers are struggling to find the dollars and cents to pay for things. They're also struggling to retain any sense of sanity they have in their lives in this moment, where it feels as if they are under attack from yet another price point, whether it be at the grocery store or the bus or their rent, so on and so forth. It has been such a pleasure. I will be happy to return. And I'm always happy to be in any space that speaks about the New York Health Act, because similar to public transit, healthcare is a human right, and you cannot say something is a right unless everyone has it. So thank you all for your advocacy. Thank you all for having me. And I cannot wait to come back and speak to you all in the future.
Thank you, Zoran. Thank you so much for coming on. All right, so we're gonna head over to Catherine, who has some actions that she was talking about before. So we're gonna bring on the slides again for the Global Justice Committee actions.
So I'll wait for the actions on the screen for a moment. I just want to emphasize again that we have these two committees. We have a number of committees that we're asking you to join tonight, but the two that I'm focusing on are the Immigration Committee, to focus on our endangered communities who are all going to need our help if the first Trump term is any indication, and I gather it's going to be even worse this time, and the Global Justice Committee, which will work on issues concerning the Middle East. The Global Justice Committee will also work on issues concerning protecting our democracy, and there's one of the first actions I'm going to talk to you about is about a bill that is coming to a vote probably tomorrow or the next day in the House. The bill is called HR 9495. It's got a very cumbersome title. I'm going to say it to you and you'll see how absurd it is. It's called Stop Terror Financing and Tax Penalties on American Hostages Act. The bill is supposed to give the Secretary of the Treasury unilateral power to take the 501c3, the nonprofit status, away from organizations like this one that they see as being supportive of terrorism. They don't have to provide proof. They don't have to give any warning. They just take the nonprofit status away. And there are a whole host of organizations that all of us depend upon for organizing that could be affected by this. And again, it could come for a vote tomorrow in the House. So I urge everybody to pick up the phone tomorrow with your coffee, juice, tea, whatever, and call your House representative and say you do not want this bill to be passed. This is a gift to Trump. It will help him dismantle protest and dismantle our democracy. And we have been told by members of Congress that they record the calls that are coming into their offices, and they can sometimes sway their votes. Some of the Democrats have already said that they're going to vote against this. Another version of it they voted for. So your calls tomorrow are incredibly important. Sadly, in a similar vein, there's another vote I want to talk to you about. The reports are that Majority Leader Schumer intends to attach a bill called the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act to a must-pass defense authorization bill. That will be sometime in the next 2 weeks. This act equates anti-Israel protest with anti-Semitism and would be used to defund schools that allow anti-Israel actions on campus. We've already seen chilling effects on free speech in higher education, and this act would make it much worse. Again, this is going to help Trump suppress our rights to protest and to speak freely. So please call Senator Schumer's office tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and every day that you can, and ask him not to attach the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act to the Defense Authorization Bill. And we'll be sending out this information tomorrow in case you don't get it tonight. On another, and let's say happier note, Bernie Sanders has tried something innovative. He has introduced 6 resolutions to the Senate called the Joint Resolutions of Disapproval to block $20 billion of offensive arms sales to Israel. He has some Democratic support, but we need to try to get him more Democratic support. Even if it doesn't pass, we need to show that people are for this. It's not going to be the last time that this is going to come up for a vote. So again, please make the calls to Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand and tell them that you are in support of this. Like many of you, I make these calls. They take 3 or 4 minutes and they can have an extraordinary effect. We're also providing a link for those of you who believe in boycotts, and I know that not everybody does, to boycott Israeli companies as an individual. But whatever you do, I hope that you'll join one of our committees and work with us to fight on the many fronts for our freedom in the coming months. And, you know, I have to say, in terms of the calls, I always feel better after I make those calls and feel less hopeless and less frightened. So if you're anything like me, and I imagine most of you are, I think you'll feel better after you make the calls. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And like she said, just it's a few minutes and you could be making a big difference. So make the call. And so we're going to move on to Anna Kellis. She's an assembly member from District 125 all the way upstate. And Emily, you're going to introduce her.
And I'm off mute. Great. I'm happy to introduce my good friend, my inspiration from here upstate. One of the persons who worked with me on Bernie round 1 in 2016, all around fantastic person, but here is her official statement or official biography that I put together for her. Anna Kellis is the New York State Assembly member for District 125, covering Tompkins County and parts of Cortland County. She was elected in 2020 after serving as county legislator for 5 years. Anna has a PhD in nutritional epidemiology, spent years studying and working in Ecuador, and also has years of experience as a progressive activist in Ithaca. She fights for the environment, women's rights, racial justice, healthcare, and much more, expertly facilitating the inside-outside game. She has taken leadership on the topics of cryptocurrency and the fashion industry, and has advocated for single payer for years. And I'm sure she has a lot to say. She's an expert on so many things, and she is so passionate in her work that I don't want to take any more of her time. So I'm going to turn it right over to Anna.
Hey, thank you, Emily, and thank you, everyone. So glad you brought everyone together for this, because I know we've all been reeling and processing and going through all the stages of grief. So coming together and having a creative and productive conversation about where to go from here is so important. One of the things that I wanted to talk about for me that I'm seeing, um, and it's a conversation that I've been having. I listened to a bit of what Brad was saying, and my dear friend Zoran as well. I heard the same thing on the streets from people who chose not to vote, or switched and voted for Trump, where they would typically have voted for Democrats, and similar messaging. They did not feel represented by either group. They felt that, you know, everybody should just have jobs, and they didn't hear any solutions for that for either, and you know, the cost of living. It was very difficult, of course, to hear, because it felt to me that what was being communicated by one candidate over the other would have gotten us a hell of a lot closer to meeting those needs than another. So the question for me was then what wasn't getting through, and some of it really came down to me. You know, I'm going to talk about two things, but first is actually the messaging, and the second then is policies. And what I have seen in the 10 years I've been in government is that I am able to successfully push through very progressive policies if I'm thoughtful about how I message them, so that I am not making my job harder for myself by inflaming the opposition, by choosing phrasing that will trigger people to want to oppose me. But if I try and educate and communicate what I'm doing, so here, I'll give you an example. When Trump won in 2016, I was, like everyone, distraught, and I spent the 6 weeks building a 7-page piece of legislation to protect immigrants in our communities. And one of the things that I did with that was to make sure that it did not include ever, anywhere, neither in my language or anywhere in the piece of legislation or anywhere in communication, the word sanctuary. And the reason is because I knew that at that point, that word triggered people to oppose me. And it was already going to be hard enough for me to get the piece of legislation through. Why use words that would trigger them even more? So what I did was I called it public safety for all. And I said, this is about creating safety for everyone. And if we have our local law enforcement doing the job of ICE, doing the job of the federal government, they will not be able to do the job that they have locally with us. The people will lose trust. We won't have any relationships left. We cannot prevent ICE from coming in, but we do not have to do their job for them. And we need to stay separate. So when I was speaking with people who are more conservative, those were the ways that I talked about it. When I was speaking about it with my family and friends that are much more progressive, I could be more broad in how I was talking about it. But what I found was I was able to get the support of all the Democrats and some of the Republicans, because they understood that what I was saying is, let's not use our local funding for the federal government's jurisdiction. Let's not use our local law enforcement for federal, for federal jurisdiction and federal purview. And that really worked. So I've seen this a lot. Opposition happens that doesn't need to be there in the context of housing, in the context of environment, in the context, you name it, in all of these contexts. So I think that we really do need to think about how do we bring messaging together so that everybody feels represented when we say everyone needs to be at the table, so that everyone has a right to healthcare. Everyone has a right to work. Everyone has a right to be housed. Everyone has a right not just to healthcare, but mental health care and childcare. When we talk about it in those contexts, we're saying that it's universal and that everyone has access and no one's being left behind. I find that that kind of messaging is disarms opposition and allows me to push through legislation that is way more progressive than what would be possible otherwise. And it allows me to retain the energy for the work on getting the legislation that is the strongest possible through than battling with people who are knee-jerk triggered by words that they feel are oppositional to the way that they see the world. So, I think that that's really important, something that we need to think about. So I'm going to just go through some of the policies that I think are going to be really important coming forward. And I would love to see action on these things. And I would love to see NIPAN helping. I think the legislature should come back before the end of the year. I would love to see the governor come back to the table and get congestion pricing back online. There are things that we need from the federal government to be finalized before there's a handover on January 20th. A few of them in this last year's budget, we actually put an allocation of $4.4 billion that would go into healthcare that needs to be approved by the federal government. We need the federal government to approve that, and that money would come from a fee on the MCOs. So it's a loophole that California used to create an influx of funding into our healthcare system. Meanwhile, I am so adamantly in agreement with my colleagues that that the New York Health Act absolutely needs to be back on the table centrally. There was an op-ed by Gustavo Rivera and Amy Paulin promoting the New York Health Act. So we are having, in my mind, our allies that are very progressive, as well as upstate more moderates like Amy Paulin, now in this moment pushing the New York Health Act. And I think that we need to take advantage of that, and we need to get messaging around it. Another thing that I think that we are really going to have to think about, people think that if we just buckle down and we fight more in New York, we will be able to protect ourselves. But I think that we have to also be realistic that over 50% of the New York government's budget comes from the federal government. 40% of our budget alone is Medicaid. So if we are eyes wide open, we need to have a conversation about how New York can be more self-sustaining and self-reliant. I'm thinking city states, a bit more, certainly not separating ourselves from the rest of the country, but becoming more self-reliant. So focusing on things that will create jobs, create manufacturing, create circular economies here in New York. So one of the things that I'm working on, for example, in the environmental sector, is a piece of legislation that will literally create the circular economy around buildings, promoting deconstruction versus demolition, that will put all of that material back into circulation, building a warehouse infrastructure across the state, and then using the material from deconstructed buildings to build new buildings. That will be both national security, because we will not have disrupted supply chains when New York is attacked by the federal government that we are going to have, because we know that the most progressive blue states are the ones that are going to be attacked and destabilized, California and New York. So we do have to look for those ways that we can build that stability and independence of our economy somewhat here in New York. So you think of doing things like that circular economy, it'll create the jobs, it'll create the marketplace, it'll create the security, and put all of that back into circulation. And then, of course, address the environmental issues, because that would reduce significant amounts of greenhouse gas emissions that we're producing in this state. We also have a piece of legislation called the GAP Fund, and that will help low-income families retrofit their homes, so that aren't eligible for Empower Plus, to help them put air source heat pumps and solar. that aren't eligible because they need a new roof or they need to get the black mold out. The GAP fund would help the lowest income people who live in homes that are in those conditions to get them up to a place where they then can put in the renewable energy infrastructure. So it helps create equity, economic equity across the state. Another thing, of course, that's absolutely critical that we talk about is reinvigorating the conversation about everybody in this state should pay their fair share. During COVID, we saw an increase in billionaires across the state. And yet they're paying 5, 6, 7% less in taxes than everyone else. So all working class people pay more as a percent of their total income than the wealthy. And again, this is messaging. We don't, having saying the tax the rich, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. But if you say, make the wealthy pay their fair share, they should be paying as much as everyone else, that works, but it's the same thing. So, talking about the fact that our wealth is mostly income. Their wealth, a tiny fraction of it is income. The rest of it is passive. And most of that is not taxed at all. Then when you start talking about it in that way, people are like, well, hell, that's completely unfair. And they're right. In that context, it is unfair. It is unfair that we've seen more billionaires grow and that New York State has more billionaires than any other state in the country. So I think that we do need to reinvigorate that conversation. I know that there's a lot, so there's only one last thing that I will say. When we talk about public safety, we don't have to shy away from the conversation of there being more crime. There is more crime. We know the solution to more crime is preventative measures, increasing mental health, increasing treatment of substance use disorders, making sure that people are housed, making sure that when people come out of a carceral system, they have access to jobs, they have access to the economy. Why? Because those things reduce crime. And if people are really serious about reducing crime, then we should prioritize bills like the Earned Time Act, which will make everyone eligible to earn time off their sentence by getting job training, workforce development, mental health training, education in the carceral system so that when they leave, they are significantly less likely to commit continued crime. That will increase public safety. There are tried and true things that states have done throughout the entire country that New York has not taken advantage of yet. That being one of them. We can do that. That will reduce crime. So coming up with clear, specific things that we can do to address the issues that people who didn't come out to vote for will feel that we are addressing their needs. So I'll stop there. There are so many things. But I appreciate all of you all coming together, and I'm, here in the fight with you all.
Thank you so much. I felt like I was in a super interesting politics class, so informative, really appreciate it. And we really do need to take on these fights and fight for these legislations in the upcoming cycle. So thank you so much. I'm gonna segue all the way to Anthony, right? Anthony's gonna introduce Jemani.
I think that Melanie is next, isn't she?
Okay, so we're gonna go with Melanie. All right, so is Melanie here?
I am.
Yes.
Amazing. I'm gonna give a little bit intro of you, Melanie. So Melanie Diarigo is a native New Yorker, mother of 3, and a former congressional candidate. She spent her career as an allied health professional building preventive health strategies and programs for organizations throughout the United States. Melanie is a leading voice for universal healthcare in national politics and currently serves as the executive director for the Campaign for New York Health. And you may have seen her around canvassing for Prop 1 and always doing stuff for everything around and advocating for every single cause. So Melanie, you're a big activist. Welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. Good evening, NIPAN. Yes, as Maria said, my name is Melanie Diarigo. I'm the executive director for the Campaign for New York Health, and I really appreciate you inviting me here to speak tonight. I think we're all feeling all the feels. To say this has been an easy week is a huge understatement. And I think while many of us are, very disappointed, I suspect many of you, like me, aren't entirely surprised at the results of this election. But that does not take away from the fact that Americans and residents will experience tremendous harm because of the results. I know a lot of the folks that spoke earlier talked about why this happened, and I couldn't agree with them more. It's I think very simple to me. Democrats lost because they did not address the needs of working people. It truly is that simple. I love that A.M. Kellis talked about messaging. Unfortunately, Republicans are masterful at messaging and messaging delivery. And they successfully convinced people who are struggling to survive that it is the fault of Democrats by tapping into the very known racism and misogyny that is woven into the fabric of our country. And perhaps even more sad, they used undocumented people as scapegoats to sort of rage farm. And it worked, it worked. And now we are where we are, we're here. I think if Democrats want to win, they have to run and fight for real democratic populist policy. That means no more goddamn half measures, no toe dips in the pool. It is time to go all in on policy solutions that working people can feel in their pockets. That is the way we win people back. And as I mentioned, I work with the Campaign for New York Health, so I'm going to focus a little bit more on healthcare, although keep in mind that I think these populist policies are across the board. We can fight for working people if we have the will and if we have the courage. I've been a little taken back because many folks out there are saying that it's not a good idea to jump into the worst case scenario of a Trump presidency. And some are even saying we should give his administration a chance. I think that is a fool's errand. Donald Trump served as president for 4 years, very, very long years. He caused unspeakable harm, and unfortunately, that harm will reverberate for generations. But at least back then, there were some guardrails in place. I think now that he is back, he's more emboldened than ever, and he is surrounded by his handpicked sycophants, right? And we know what to expect. We know at every turn he's going to sell us out as he stuffs the pockets of his friends, of his billionaire buddies. He will put them before us every single time. But I will say the one thing that I really learned, and I hope you did too, in his last presidency, is that he is a person who does, or at the very least tries his damnedest to do what he says, right? So each and every one of us should be real somber in this moment, and we should take his campaign promises very, very seriously. And I don't say this to scare you, but I say this to prepare you. The worst thing we can do right now is get caught flat-footed. I mean, I've been paying very close attention, not only to what Trump is saying, but what the folks in his orbit are saying around healthcare. I do want to just note that 140 individuals from his last administration either contributed, wrote, or advised on Project 2025. And these are folks, including the likes of like a Stephen Miller, a Mark Meadows, and folks even worse than them, if you can imagine. If you haven't familiarized yourself with the healthcare policies in Project 2025, I suggest you do. But at a minimum, we know that the Trump administration is focused on deregulation. They're focused on reduced federal spending. And let us not kid ourselves at all, folks. His administration will be responsible for millions of people losing coverage, for exploding costs, and for lining the pockets of the insurance industry. Now, we're not exactly sure what he's going to go after first. Will he pick it apart? Will it be one big, one fell swoop of a change? We don't yet know, but we do know it's going to devastate healthcare as we know it. There are plans to privatize Medicare and Medicaid on the table. They hope to cut Medicaid funding. And for those of you who don't know, nearly 1/3 of New Yorkers are currently on Medicaid. So that'll be a huge blow to New York. His administration plans to reintroduce risk pools, which would effectively it completely explode costs if you've got a pre-existing condition. We've been hearing for years, and they pretty much are doubling down on the fact that they do want to dismantle the ACA. What does that mean? In practical terms, it means that we are very likely going to we're going to lose preventive covered services like mammograms and cancer screenings. We could lose pre-existing condition protections. We will lose the ability to have our children on our plan until the age of 26. And we could probably wave bye-bye to the out-of-pocket protections. We know more Americans are going to go into debt and more Americans are going to die. Now, just to level set where we are, The ACA subsidies are set to expire at the end of 2025. If Congress does not extend them, and I have no reason to believe that they will, given the current makeup, many millions of Americans are going to lose their health care coverage. So I want to be as clear as I can be. I am not at all trying to be hyperbolic. Everything that I just mentioned comes exactly from Trump, his advisors, and his, a team of administrators. Things are very, very bleak right now. It is looking more and more likely that the Republicans are going to have a trifecta on the federal level. That means there will be very little we can do to stop the harm that will be imposed on us by the federal government. And we have to sit with that. We have to come to terms with that real quick, because we only have one option the way I see it right now. And that option is to act, and to act swiftly. And there is some good news. I think it's important to really name where we're at, so we know what we're up against. But we do have an opportunity on the state level. We have that opportunity right now to protect New Yorkers. We have legislation. I know so many people mentioned it in the chat, that is active in both the state Senate and the Assembly, that would not only prevent healthcare costs from going through the roof, it would protect healthcare for seniors, for people with low income, for people with disabilities. It would protect each and every one of us. And I know that you know this. I know you know what I'm going to say. It is the New York Health Act. It will expand benefits. It will cut waste. It will cover everyone. And for years, and this is not going to be new information, for years, we have all heard legislators tell us, oh, we're not quite ready. Perhaps it's a little bit radical, right? We've heard that. I've heard that. I still hear that. I hate that, right? But folks, I cannot say it more clearly. This right now is our break glass moment. This moment is not just about progress, it is about protection. The legislature and the governor not only have an opportunity right now, but they have the responsibility to protect us all by making sure the federal government does not decimate our healthcare. We don't have the time or the luxury to sit and wait to see what kind of damage a Trump presidency is going to bestow, because at the end of the day, or maybe even sooner than that, we're going to pay with our lives. And that is not a price that any New Yorker should pay. It's not a price that any American should pay. I know that I'm a little bit preaching to the choir here, but it is long, long past time that we stop playing defense. We've got to play offense. We can show this administration that they cannot fuck with New York. We can tell this legislature, hey, come on, work with us. You can be a model for the country. You can set the example for what it truly, truly looks like to fight for working people, because that is the only thing that is going to win elections. That is the only thing that is going to bring people back. And frankly, that is the most important reason legislators are there. Sometimes they forget their job. They forget that they are there to work for us. We have to remind them. And so I am here to tell you all tonight that we absolutely need you in this fight. We need you with us to exert immense pressure on the legislature, because that is what it's going to take to move this bill. But I really do believe in this moment we can do it. I know I might have sounded a little hyperbolic. I'm really not trying to. I think that a Trump presidency is going to change everything in this country. Sometimes it's an external chaotic circumstance that propels progress forward. And I think that is this moment. And so how do you get involved? Well, I'm going to give you 2 quick ways right now. You can join the NYPAN Single Payer Committee. You can do it by getting involved with the Campaign for New York Health. And get to work, because we're not wasting a day. We have a meeting, the Campaign for New York Health, next week. I'm happy to send it to the NYPAN folks. Maybe they can send it out for you or send it out to you. But I'm going to ask you right now, in this moment, you know what's at stake. So I'm hoping someone put the link in the chat to join the single. Oh, it's on the screen right now. Make sure you sign up, because we cannot waste this moment. If we waste this moment, people die. If we act on this moment, we save lives. So that's our choice. So I'm going to ask you to join me and fight like hell for what we deserve. Thank you so much, NYPAN. Thanks for your partnership. Thanks for the fight that I know you'll be in, joining me ahead. We've got this, New York. We're not going to roll over and take it. That is not who we are. That is not what we're made of. So it is time to band together and get this done. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. I feel so motivated right now. And I think someone dropped a link on the chat for the Campaign for New York Health. But there's also the link to join a NYPAN committee. please join. It's time to put all that energy into something positive and get to work. Let's pass the New York Health Act. We can do it. So we're going to move on. So is Jumani on the call, Ting?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So Anthony, it's your turn to introduce Jumani.
All right, everybody, how you doing? My name is Anthony Beckford. I'm going to introduce our public advocate, Jumani Williams of New York City, who previously served as the New York City Council representing the 45th District, who started off as a community organizer for tenants, where he fought for truly affordable income-targeted housing across New York City and New York State. While he was in the council, he championed landmark legislation, basically the most legislation passed in regards to making sure that we reform the New York City Police Department by ending, the racist abuse of stop and frisk, within the community's colors, basically creating the NYPD's Office of Inspector General to investigate unlawful and ethical behavior within the NYPD. Also was a former co-chair of the council's task force to combat against gun violence and bring, holistic solutions, and reducing shootings throughout the community as well too, and provide wraparound services. And as a public advocate, he continues to work on its expansion and improvement even to this day. Jumani has led the fight for better police and safer streets, affordable housing, and transparency and accountability in city government. As public advocate, Jumani has proven that you could be an activist elected official, to bring the voices of the people to the forefront and to make sure that their voices are amplified, heard, and that they are also seen. And he's become a progressive beacon for all throughout New York City. Ladies and gentlemen, public advocate, Jumani Williams.
Is Jumani on? Jumani? We can't hear you.
He was. He seems to have dropped off.
Oh,
There was something in our group chat about how he had to go for 15 minutes and come back.
okay.
That's what he said.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I know someone had a question around healthcare, and I think Ting or Emily caught it on the chat. We could bring that up right now.
Did you catch it, Ting?
Actually, it was not a question about healthcare. Steve Auerbach asked about bringing the assembly back into session,
Yes.
which was a question for Anna if she's still here.
There was also the question which Anna answered about the healthcare item. And I'm just going to read her reply in case anybody missed it in chat. Regarding the question that was exact, somebody had about what was the health bill that she was referring to that we needed to get through implemented before Republicans yank it back. Budget item, this year's budget, $4.4 billion. Fee to be charged to the managed care organizations in order to get a federal match. Funds would then be reimbursed to the MCOs. I'm just going to drop it in chat. You don't need me to read. I'll just drop it again in chat, but it's from Anna, not me.
Jumani's back.
Perfect. All right. So Jumani, you're on.
I'm on?
Yeah.
Oh, peace and blessing, love and light to everybody. Thanks for inviting me on to give a couple moments to speak. Nice to be in a good space where everybody's thinking the same. Everybody's in mourning, everybody's in pain, but everybody's trying to figure out how we fight back. So I really appreciate that. I didn't hear what everyone said. I did hear a couple of them. Hold on a second, I'm sorry. Just, I think that what I was asked, I guess what everybody asked, our feelings about the elections. And for me, I always thought on the top level, this country is misogynist, it's racist, anti-Black racist in particular, has been for a very, very long time. From its inception to the Tea Party, to MAGA, to now, that is 100% clear. That's a statement of fact. If there's something we have to argue about, I just don't really want to argue about it. But we have seen that it isn't insurmountable, even though it exists. And the question for me is, why was it not insurmountable this time? And I was, I'm sure some people are pointing out, but when you look at the numbers, Trump got less votes now this year than they did in 4 years ago in 2020. So that says something. He didn't really pick up additional voters. What happened was Democratic Party was so dismal in attracting voters. Biden won about 80 something million, and Kamala went to 60 something million, almost about 20 million voters that the Democratic Party dropped. I don't even know if they went all over to the Republican side, and some of the numbers I saw, some of the Latino votes, although it's a huge swing, particularly in Cuban when you break it down, but some of them actually were where they usually are. So the great migration isn't as great as some folks think, although some people definitely left that we may not have wanted to. And I did hear people say that, I mean, the biggest reason is because the party did not do what the party could have done, particularly on the issues that the party is best at. It's always frustrating to me when we allow other people to take a message that they're not even good at. We are literally better on housing and affordability. We're actually better on public safety. We're afraid to talk about public safety. And so when we're afraid to talk about public safety, we usually lean into Republican talking points. And I don't know when we're going to learn that Republicans are better at their own talking points, and they're better at being Republicans. And they have done poll after poll that show that public safety that does not solely rely on carceral situations and law enforcement is supported by everyone, giving what folks need, making sure that mental health is not first responded to by law enforcement. When I ask 3 questions, wherever I am in a room of folks, how many people think crime is an issue? Raise your hand. How many people think that police are partners in that? Raise your hand. How many people believe that they can do it themselves? The answer is always yes, yes, no, for the most part. And that's anywhere I go. So there's a belief that we cannot handle these conversations around public safety and housing, when in fact, those are 2 of the main things that I've been pushing for a very, very long time. Successes, some more successes than not. That's up and down the state, up and down the city. And it really, really works. But what we have, I feel, are like status quo elected officials in the Democratic Party that really rival the status quo of the Republican Party, not with some of the evil proposals and positions. But I go back to 2016, like you have people who probably have never voted for a black toothbrush, voted for Barack Obama, and then voted for Donald Trump. I don't know what clearer message an electorate could have sent to the people who represent them that they did not want more of the same messengers, and they did not want more of the same messages. And our party continued to send the same messengers with the same type of message. That is what happened here. That is fully, thoroughly, completely what happened here. And to have people say and try to blame the left is very disingenuous at best, because the quote unquote powers that be in the Democratic Party never adopted the things that we said anyway. As a matter of fact, they joined the Republican Party to push back on us. So how can you say that we were the ones that caused the problem? There are also some things that we have to figure out when it comes to culturally. We just have to really understand and take heed that we can't ignore people's emotions, even when we're right on an issue. And I think it's sometimes we forget. We try to just shove down everybody's throat. And I'm honest, and I remember that they segregated the school system with 9 little boys and girls in one classroom with the National Guard. That's what happened there. It didn't happen just by shoving it down everybody's throat, because everyone can't handle it. And I only say that not because we're not right on the issues, but if we ignore the emotion that often overrides the intelligence of people, it's going to be a problem. And so we should take the time to acknowledge that emotion and try to help them unpack. And most of the times they'll see that that's not even based on the things that they are most afraid of. But if we don't take time to do that, we're going to let people's emotions run rampant, and we won't push through this. And if we don't force our Democratic leaders to allow new conversations, new messengers, I have to say, public safety is one of the things I've been biggest on for 14 years. And every space I've been in, from the reddest to the bluest, people think they disagree with me, and they don't. They disagree with the sound bites that they've heard, may disagree sometimes with what someone said I've said, but I have never seen a population more ready to adopt a public safety infrastructure that's not simply not simply based on the law enforcement and cost solutions. And the last thing that I will say, we have allowed it now so bad that if we wanted to create a public library system, we wouldn't be able to create it because the Republicans would push down how this is just a social dogma of socials that they don't want. And our Democratic leaders would not have done the right thing to explain what a public library system is. That's how bad it is. And so we really watched in real time what many of us were hoping wouldn't happen, but it did. Let's take the right messages from it and not the wrong ones. And I'm happy to do what I can wherever I can to help craft the messages that I think can help. I grew up, as you can tell, Black most of my life, from a Caribbean community, person of faith, and a lefty. And so I'm often aware of all that is with me and kind of what translates and what doesn't, and what I need to translate so people can understand it. Because there are key words sometimes you say, people just ain't hearing you. And I'll leave with my own example. I used to talk about privilege a lot. And when I realized talking about privilege, the person was hearing me say that they were racist. And I'm like, you might be, I never take it off the table, but that's not what I was saying at that moment in time. And so I say the same thing I would have said, and I just sometimes skip that word. Because we have to know, whether we're right or not, when they hear that word, they're going to shut down. Emotion takes over. And we just have to be smarter than that with some of the other things that are more culturally sensitive. But when it comes to economics, when it comes to housing, when it comes to public safety, we should not be losing that. And that's just because the Democrat Party refuses to adopt and do many things that we've been asking them to do for a very long time. So I'll pause there. I know we got a lot of work to do. People are working on 4-year plans. I think we need a 2-year plan, but we got to go and get one of these houses back and not have to wait for 2 years if we don't have to.
Thank you so much, Jomani. Really important stuff. And I hope that we all get together and continue acting, organizing, doing all that good stuff because we need it. We really need it. And we need to continue fighting. So as a good segue into what Arthur's going to say, because we need to continue organizing together. So Arthur, take it away.
So we've heard critiques both from the people who have been here at this forum, and Jomani and Anna was wonderful, and Melanie was wonderful, and the question is, okay, we hear all these great things that we need to do. We need to pass this bill. We need to pass that bill. We need to get this thing not to happen, etc. This organization was born out of the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016. And it was a statement, that campaign, where Bernie came pretty close to getting the Democratic nomination against Hillary Clinton. And they worked really hard to bury that wing, our wing. Jomani was a delegate. A lot of other people here were delegates to the convention. They tried very hard to bury us, ignore us, and not try to do anything to change the Democratic Party, which then crashed in November of 2016. That same party has ignored all of our voices. We can organize, but in fact, we continue to be ignored. People were telling there were 2 voices in the ear of the Harris campaign. One which said, go right, tell everybody you're a gun enthusiast, have the Cheneys march with you, and talk about how much you love fracking. And then there were other people that said, you got to talk about jobs, you got to talk about inflation, you got to talk about the economy, you got to talk about schools, you got to talk about things that people are afraid of, which is exactly what our side of the movement has been saying to the Democratic Party since, at least since 2016, if not before. So what does all this have to do with our meeting? Because NIPAN is at this point the only statewide organization that will stand at, we're not trying to form a third party. We want to push progressive politics. We want to push progressive politicians, and we want to organize around issues all around New York State, so that at least in our state, we can begin to push again to have the Democratic Party act as as we hope it would act, as a voice for working people, as a voice for minorities, as a voice for the disabled, as a voice for women, as a voice for people who need housing, as a voice for people who are immigrants. It doesn't do that. The party itself doesn't do that. And it's headed for a disastrous defeat in 2026, excuse me, during the next governor's race if things don't change. We also have a mayoral race coming up next year. NIPAN is going to be try to play a big role in that race, because we think it's important that there be a progressive candidate that is in the lead in this, and that the progressives don't all shoot in a circular firing squad, and we wind up with whether we get Mayor Adams again or maybe a Mayor Cuomo. So the pitch that I'm making here is go to nipan.org. Whatever, if you don't have a QR code, go to it's on the screen now, but go to nipan.org for old fogies like me, who can't aim their camera at the QR code on the screen. Go to nipan.org, become a member. Volunteer to be a member of a local chapter. We're going to be rebuilding those chapters in a way that hopefully will allow us to work with people in our communities on issues, on candidates next year, all over New York State. There are going to be no local elections, and we have to continue to rebuild locally. We have some people here, like Anthony, like the Wilkes, and others, like I think Emily Adams is on the State Democratic Committee. Jay, who started off this program, where he lives way up in the northeastern part of New York State. He's actually sits on the State Democratic Committee's executive committee, but he was elected to be a state committee member from his district, and people respect what he has to say. So please go to nipan.org, join NIPAN, join a local chapter. It's so critical that we not just be a bunch of kvetches who go to meetings like this and say, yeah, and sit around with our friends and say things should be better. We can do things, we can get things done. We've gotten things done, and the horrible part of Harris losing is that we have Trump to deal with for the next 4 years. But the good part of it is the Democratic Party, they're not blaming the left this time. They are not. Read the New York Times. They are saying, oh my God, Bernie Sanders was right. Oh my God, we have to stop organizing against the white working class or working class voters that have left the Democratic Party. White, Black, Hispanic, they've left the Democratic Party. We have an opportunity here. Please join with us. Take that opportunity. Go to nipan.org and be part of our organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arthur. Like Arthur said, please join NIPAN. We will be organizing locally. We have a very important election coming up in New York City for the mayor's race. There may be other elections coming up as well, a comptroller's race that they may be vacated. So it's important that we get involved and we can shape politics for the next year. And we can lead the way. Now that we have a Trump presidency, we can lead the way in immigrant rights and LGBTQ rights, abortion rights, and fighting for our city and fighting for the people. So please do join. And we do want folks to have a voice in our endorsement process. We want them to be part of the whole process, and we want to hear you out, because this is led by people just like you. We're all organizers. This is a volunteer organization. We're all doing this our volunteer time. So we want you to be part of that too. And so we're going to move on to a question and comment section. We're going to have around 5 to 10 minutes to do that. And what I'm going to say is that we put stack on the chat, and Ting will keep track of the stack, and we'll call on you and you'll be unmuted and have a minute to speak. So you can just write stack on the chat if you want to ask a question or give a comment. All right, so we have the first one, Steve. So.
Yep, Earl is first.
Oh, Earl's first. Okay. Perfect.
See,
Earl,
I unmuted. Thanks, everybody. This has been really great. I just wanted to ask a question. So with the rank and file voting in the mayoral race, is there, NIPAN have a strategy? How do we use rank and file voting to ensure that a progressive, one of the, I guess the four or whatever progressive candidates becomes the mayor and not Como or Adams?
I'm going to leave Arthur to reply to that, or George. You were just talking about that, Arthur. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
If I may, we are an affiliate. NIPAN is an affiliate of WFP, and a lot of the affiliates there are who got burnt with Adams, who won with 27% of the vote, and the progressives all split the vote. We're determined this time to use ranked choice voting in the way it was intended, and to endorse a slate of progressives who can then make each other the second and third choice. And that way, we'll get a progressive. We may not get the one we vote number one, but we'll get 2 or 3. And there are a lot of good progressives running, as you saw a couple of tonight, and there are more. You know, it's a relatively new procedure, ranked choice voting. We intend to get it right this time. We're not going to do a circular firing squad. We're not going to let Cuomo, the disgraced former governor, be our mayor. We got to be smart about it. Okay. So we're very cognizant of that, Earl. And NIPAN will play a central role if we have the resources to do that. As Arthur's comments go double, we really need you to join, really need to be a sustainer if possible, a monthly sustainer, so we could hire a staff person to help us elect the progressive mayor, to get the New York Healthcare Act pass, and to protect immigrants and do all the things we talked about at this meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, so Steve is next, right?
Yes.
Gene.
All good. I just wanted to make a pitch for 2 tracks that are sort of thinking of what went wrong. One is, you know, the consultant class, moneyed class problem with the Democratic Party, with Uber lobbyists whispering sweet nothings into Harris's ear, all of the neoliberal stuff, all of the Sanders message and policy. I also want to urge folks to really think hard about what we can do to overcome the media landscape problem. And by the media landscape, I don't mean the New York Times and CNN. It's all of it in terms of the social media, the mass texts that go out saying that FEMA is killing people in Pennsylvania, which is a message I actually heard. So I'm going to take the liberty of dropping some links in, folks that sort of follow up on this, but it really resonated. These links really resonated with my canvassing experience in small town, white and Hispanic Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Steve. So he just dropped some links in the chat. Please refer to that. Thanks again. And we are going to move to Jean. Jean, you're muted.
Thought you guys were unmuting people. Sorry about that. I think this was excellent, but I was disappointed about one thing. Nobody got to the biggest obstacle we have to getting anything passed and make any of these changes in politics, and that's money. Both presidential candidates got billions of dollars from billionaires, and after the election, the ones who picked the right horse are going to be going to collect something, and it just is such an obstacle. You know, you can always find somebody who is willing to sell their vote. And we're going to have to get public opinion up to such a high pitch before we can overcome that. So we got to talk about the money in politics.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, there's too much money in politics, even at the local level. And the most recent local elections, there was a NYC APAC group that was giving money to candidates, and then you see that at the congressional level. So yes, we need to eliminate money from politics. So Jane, we agree. We're going to move on to the next person, Tina.
Yes, hi everybody, and thank you for all of this. And to cut to the chase and not to duplicate everybody, sorry, I wrote it down here. So my first comment is, it's a comment and a question. So what is really the central thing here for me is that we have a Democratic Party that I'm not even sure I want to be a Democrat anymore, but we have a Democratic Party that functions from the top down, and we need the opposite. So this is something to keep in mind, how we can strengthen participation from the bottoms up, and our elected officials should be responding to that, not the other way around. This goes without saying, but it actually is not working that way. And the second thing is a question in general I would ask, and not expect an answer at this point. But I am curious and a little bit concerned about the relationship of NIPAN to the Democratic Party, in terms of, I feel that this is not ideal for leverage, and if we have leverage, I'm not sure we're optimizing it. So I am just putting that out there. I'm not expecting a miracle answer, but so I'm actually not surprised about the election. I am probably in the minority here when I say I am thrilled that the Democratic Party and Harris lost, and I am mortified that Trump won. And actually, you can feel that way, and it makes sense. So I think this is an opportunity to learn and to get rid of a lot of stuff. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Tina. And, to your point, NIPAN is trying to, in many occasions, as a former state committee member, and all the work we've done in the state committee, we're trying to reform the party as much as we can and make it a more transparent, accessible place. And I totally understand everything you're saying. We've been in the same movement together and same meetings together, fighting, for, Palestinian rights, fighting for the environment and everything. So I totally understand what you're saying, but sometimes we need to, fight, going within and fight. And that sometimes means us, putting ourselves in these positions like, the state committee or county committee, or district leaders. So, really getting involved at the most local, granular level and representing your neighborhoods. So I think that at the core of it, NIPAN is doing that work, and it means getting involved, even if it is in your Democratic Party, and being that voice and finding others and uniting. So we totally agree, but we need to sometimes, reform, or, who's going to do it. So I'm going to move on to the next person. Yes, a Democratic County Committee, we need to organize more. So the next one is Anne.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria. My concern is really about the bottom going up as well, like teen, and that would be folks that are in local parties. For instance, we have groups here in the Bronx that are political parties, but they're social clubs that like to bully people. And if you contact also, like, our state assembly person or borough president with concerns, they will not help you. I was working on my taxes last year, asked for help. They had sent a form letter that said, we'll show you how to do your taxes. And it really turned out that they wanted to submit my taxes via computer and not help me understand what forms I needed to use, things like that. So I've dealt with a number of related problems to that, as well as when I was assaulted by a local political, a family of a local party leader. They made sure that I would not be able to contact the police and get even the police to take a report. And that is how our community really does work. And what that has to do with the election is you had a majority of white women, a lot of Hispanic women, a lot of Asian women voting for Trump for the election. And that is something that needs to be addressed. Proper leadership and people respecting one another. And that's my point for one of the things that we need to work on as women and fellow Americans. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for that comment.
How do I get into the queue to ask a question or
Is that
make?
Susan?
I don't know. Lori, was that you?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna take one more person, and that's Melanie. So unfortunately, we can't take anyone else. But you can definitely drop your comment or question on the chat. Unless folks want to take one more question. I don't know. Can you go real quickly, Lori, then?
Yeah, I can.
All right, so go ahead.
I just want to say I was, watching a lot of different people putting spins on what happened. And one guy said something that was very interesting to me. And it was statistics from the elections from the last 50 years. And what he said was the person who's running on the incumbent's party will only get 5 points higher than the incumbent got, which meant that because Biden was only had a 40% approval rating, Kamala should have only gotten 45% of the vote, and she actually got 48% of the vote. So in his mind, she did fantastically, even though she lost. And that's something to keep in mind, because Democrats are always looking for the things to kick themselves about what they did wrong and what they didn't do right. And there's room for that, but also in perspective of the greater scheme of things, Kamala, I think, was a great candidate. And maybe with those statistics, we can be a little more hopeful about what we did do right this last election, even though we lost it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for that. So we're going to end off with Melanie.
Thank you so much, Maria. So I think I have a critical point that I just want to raise. NYPAN has always been so wonderful about getting involved in elections and championing the progressive candidate, and I appreciate that. I've been one of them. I'm with you all 100%. But I do think it's really important that we recognize that this moment is very different, that this is not business as usual. And I heard a lot of that coming up in solutions. Oh, let's back we'll fight for the mayor candidate. We'll fight for the city council candidate. And all of that is important, but we need to remember what the last Trump presidency was like and how bad this one's going to be. He throws everything at you all at once as fast as you can intentionally. It disorients us. We don't know how to fight for everybody at the same time. And I bring this up because I think it is critical this month and next month that we get our shit together really quickly and become very disciplined in determining what that plan of attack is and who's going to get what. Because if we spread ourselves around like a peewee football field, we are going to lose, and we're going to lose bad. You know, I obviously, and you know, I work for a statewide organization that I deeply believe in. I really do think that putting a lot of emphasis into what we can do this month and next month and pushing these state legislatures could prevent a ton of harm to New Yorkers. That is going to be critical. We need people to not wait. We need people to get involved right away. The same is true, you know, to protect New York City, to protect these council seats. But I think it would, I guess, you know, all that to say, I think it would be helpful to maybe get a strategy committee together to make sure that we can be very disciplined in moving forward. Otherwise, we're going to be very disorganized and unprepared for a very powerful Trump presidency, one that is very well funded. None of us are, you know, so we're already disadvantaged. Steve mentioned the right-wing media, also a good point, but we're not going to overcome that in the next year or two either. You know, they're owned by right-wing oligarchs. So I think we've got to get real clear on what we can do, even against, you know, immense odds. There is still work, and we do have pathways, and we need to zero in on those pathways and fight like hell to achieve our goals.
Mel, do you mean a strategy committee that is through various organizations?
I would love that, but at a minimum through NIPAN, but I definitely think we can pull others in that are interested. I think folks are not really realizing the gravity of this moment. This is not business as usual. They are going to undermine everything that we know, the rule of law, all of it. We are not going to be operating on the same terrain that we have been operating, even with all the obstacles. It is going to get extremely, extremely difficult. And I don't think we can waste the time that we have now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Melanie. We really appreciate that. So we're going to brainstorm this. We're either going to do something with organizations, or we can just add it to the committee form, but we'll figure this out. And we're going to get all of this good stuff that you all saw through email. You're going to get a recording of the meeting and links to everything. So, you know, stay tuned. You will get all that good information. So don't need to rush to like copy anything on a chat. We'll send it to you all. But this does bring us to the end, and we all really appreciate that you all came together and spent nearly 2 hours with us talking about what's next, what can we do? And as Melanie said, we need to act now. We need to organize. There is a political component to this, but there's also a community and organizing component to this. The New York Health Act is in the you know, the state legislature right now. We need to pass it. We need to, as much as we can, to make it possible. But we also need to do things like fighting for immigrant justice. There's a lot of you know, immigrant brothers and sisters who are going to need our support now that we have a Trump presidency coming up. So we're going to need to be there for them, and we're also going to need to continue to fight for, you know, all of New Yorkers, all of the working class New Yorkers that need it. And so with that, I'm going to leave with a quote that Ting likes to put in our emails, and it's so good. We aren't beaten unless we give up, and we're not doing that. So we're not doing that. We're not giving up. We're going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to organize. And please stay tuned. We're going to send all this information through email. There's good stuff coming up. Organizing for the mayoral election, organizing for the New York Health Act, organizing as a community for NIPAN, for our neighborhoods, and getting involved. I know there's been mention of, you know, stuff that we can do at local politics, county committee, state committee. Do get involved. We're going to send stuff around. And thank you all so much. We look forward to seeing you around. Thank you. Have a good night.
All your House members about